Hello Internet Jazza here. If you've been watching the newsy news, you may have heard about the Human Rights Act and the fact that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, David Cameron, wants to scrap it. This may sound a little bit confusing because human rights sound like an integrally good thing, right? So I'm here to explain what the Human Rights Act is, why Davcam hates it, and why people hate Davcam for hating the Human Rights Act. You follow? Good, let's go. In order to understand what the Human Rights Act is, we must first know what the European Court of Human Rights is, also known as the ECHR, which is housed in this really quite ugly building in Strasbourg, France. The aim of the European Court of Human Rights is to get European countries to adhere to another ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, which was set up after World War II in 1953 to stop European countries from being dicks to their citizens. Is a very basic breakdown of what they both do. In order to try and avoid confusion with the two ECHRs, I'm going to call the Court of Human Rights the Court, and I'm going to call the Convention on Human Rights the Convention. We clear? Moving on. There are 47 member states of the Convention, and these countries include all of geographical Europe, plus Russia, Turkey, and the Caucasus, excluding only Belarus, because Belarus has some dodgy human rights issues about, like, minorities and the rights of journalists to express themselves. And so every now and again Belarus would be like, hey, can we get some of those human rights? And the rest of Europe just goes, no! British citizens are able to take their cases to the European Court if they feel that the British courts have ignored their human rights. And they've been able to do so since 1966. And it turns out that apparently 1966 was a really good year. The Beatles, the World Cup, human rights, good year. If the court finds that somebody's rights have been breached, they will usually state this fact and then explain the reasons why. Sometimes the court will suggest how the country can have a better relationship with human rights through perhaps law change, and very occasionally, very, very rarely, they will suggest financial compensation. Now, this is an important point. The UK and the rest of the members of the European Court cannot be forced to make the changes that the court suggests. If a country chooses to ignore the ruling by the court, it comes across as a broken promise, and there are no real specific consequences. If you're still with me, you now have a basis to understand what the Human Rights Act is in relation to both of the ECHRs. As a reward, here's a kitten. And now let's carry on. Now finally, we can get to the Human Rights Act, which is what Davcam apparently hates so much. The Act was brought in 1998 so that British judges could consider the legal implications of the European Convention without cases having to physically go to Strasbourg to be heard. And this essentially streamlined the costs and sped up the whole legal process. As a result, British cases have been won by people who have found their human rights breached in healthcare, LGBT rights, education, and freedom of speech. There are lots of positive ticks to how the Human Rights Act has worked alongside both of the ECHRs. This all sounds pretty good so far, right? It means that judges in the UK are able to consider human rights as they were defined after the Second World War without having to go to a separate court on the European continent. That's essentially what the Human Rights Act does. But now we can get into why some conservatives despise the Act and the ECHR. Many believe that the Human Rights Act adversely benefits criminals, specifically those that we're looking to deport to other countries. It's often reported in the press that criminals who live in the UK cannot be deported to another country because the country that we want to deport them to has a dodgy record when it comes to human rights. So that would include stuff like using torture in order to get legal evidence. One of the most high-profile cases of this is that of Abu Qatada. Remember the guy with the hook for a hand? Who resisted deportation to Jordan for 8 years, costing £1.7 million and needing treaty change with Jordan in order for us to do so. Basically, it was a right palaver. These kind of high-profile cases created the image of European judges coming over the English Channel and telling British judges what to do. And if the UK hates anything, it's being told what to do by the mainland European bœuf. However, I should mention that over the past 5 years or so, only between 5 and 10% of foreign criminals in the UK have managed to resist deportation in this way. So basically, 90% of those who want to resist deportation and want to stay in the UK aren't able to. They do have to leave. The second reason that lots of people hate the Human Rights Act is a little bit more abstract than that, and it's based around sovereignty. Many in the Conservative Party believe that a multinational court shouldn't have sway over the decisions of British judges. They argue that British values and the British legal system should be enough. The final reason that the Conservative Party dislikes the Human Rights Act is because of this overarching narrative of we need to be tough on the European Union, even though the European Court and the Human Rights Act literally have nothing to do with the EU, apart from the fact that they share a number of members and both have Europe in the title. That's literally where the similarity of the two of them end. What's interesting is that David Cameron has never said that he's wanted to leave the Court or the Convention of Human Rights. He just wants to replace the Human Rights Act with a British Bill of Rights because, let's be fair, everything sounds better with British in the title. This will mean, in theory, that British citizens will still be able to take their cases to the European Court, which makes you think that wanting to repeal the Act probably has more to do with sovereignty and looking tough on Europe than anything else. It looks like the Conservative Party have stalled on repealing the Human Rights Act for the time being. It wasn't in our first Queen's speech this year, but let me know, what do you think? Would a British Bill of Rights be any better other than having some wonderful alliteration? Have I missed anything? Do you think that there's anything that I haven't considered when explaining it? You're a really intelligent lot, let me know. Also, if you are just coming to my videos, if this is the first video that you've seen of mine, subscribe, because I talk about this kind of stuff a lot and I enjoy having the chinwag in the comments below with you guys. Like this video. Also, if you like podcasts and hearing a couple of people talking about political issues, then subscribe to my podcast that I do with my friend Jimmy. The link is in the description down below. So I've been rhyming with oranges. Thanks for watching. Toodaloo. Let's have a chat. One of my followers a few days ago asked me advice on what they should do when they hear or are subject to homophobic language on the street. And I was basically trying to give as sound advice as I could by saying, like, always be safe, read the situation,